Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Saturday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. It's the 26th of July. As always, we encourage you to visit our website for the very latest weather information for your part of Alaska by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov for the entire statewide view there. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391. Find each Weather Service office in Alaska on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube there. You can get information after this show on YouTube by going to AKWX TV in the search bar. You'll get this complete broadcast, or go to our broadcast partner, alaskapublic.org, and watch it there. Here's a look at the fire danger. As we've been talking about for the last several days now, fire danger is shrinking with more and more rainfall making it through the interior and certainly through south central and southeastern parts of Alaska. Conditions are pretty tame as far as fire danger goes. There's still a few hot spots or elevated areas of fire danger across the eastern Alaska Range, northern slopes, and into the Copper River Basin, but that is about it, and more rain is still moving through those regions right now, so conditions should be waning even more tomorrow. Looking out to the west, you can almost pick out the upper level weather pattern if you watch the clouds very carefully. Watch for an upside down shaped U pattern over the Bering Sea, and watch for that northerly flow down the west coast. Can you see it there? There's that upside down kind of horseshoe shaped pattern. We have waves of low pressure and circulations here on this side, and we have another one over the Gulf. This kind of pattern is going to stay with us at least for the foreseeable future and turn into more of a blocking pattern. It has been a very high amplitude trough and ridge pattern where we see air across the North Pacific rise very northerly into perhaps north of the Arctic Circle and then come crashing down back into Alaska. And that's brought a lot of cold air into the interior and kept storms focused over the Gulf of Alaska. Well, this type of pattern will solidify even more and move even less than it has been. So we're probably going to be in this type of weather pattern at least for the foreseeable future and really most of next week. Now, as far as effects go out across the Pacific with this, we keep that northerly flow coming down the coast over the Alaska Peninsula. We keep a lot of fog and marine stratus out across the Bering, and we keep most of the active weather well south of the chain. As you get over into the mainland part of Alaska, this sets the stage for more low pressure systems here across the eastern Gulf and those easterly waves to move in across the Alcan and bring more wet weather and storms to parts of the central and eastern interior. It usually ends up in more of a drier pattern for the YK and the Seward Peninsula and could keep things on the cool side for the Arctic coast. So you get more of the same weather that you've been having, probably a little bit more of a focus for wetter weather across the central and eastern parts of Alaska and perhaps south central Alaska as well. The visible satellite picture today indicates that clouds are back over southeast. You can see that low pressure system working northward once again, dragging in drier air and pushing that out to sea. Kodiak looking at a little more cloud cover on the north end of the archipelago there. Westerly and sections of Alaska looking at a little more sunshine than you've seen in previous days. But you can also see the spiraling of that low pressure, or high pressure I should say, and the stratus out across the marine areas. So a circling of that more stable air and cooler and wetter air across the Bering. Very visible in this situation, and another round of cold there for the Arctic coast with temperatures this morning a little bit on the chilly side, in some cases below zero. Now, it's not unheard of that we see those really cooler temperatures in July and August, especially across the Arctic coast, but some places got a little bit colder than normal this morning. One of those would be McGrath. A 42-degree low this morning tied the record low temperature for the state back in 1972. So a little bit of cold air there for you. In the meantime, It's been kind of a wet period for areas around Juneau. As of after yesterday's rainfall, new record rains, about 1.5 inches there, the most you've seen on that date since 2006. Out across the west, sunshine there was helping to develop a little more shower activity as that cloud cover met up with some of the warmer land. Also some showers across the Alcan up around Eagle. Certainly some rain across southeast. Otherwise drying conditions from west to east. We saw a few spot areas of wet weather. Some of those a little bit on the west side of Wasilla and around Willow. Down toward Big Lake, though, things were drying up nicely. High pressure south and west of the Pribilofs at 1,025 millibars should be enough to hold back rainfall across the western part of the chain for most areas there. This will probably only be a glancing blow at that. And only showers for most areas there. A better chance for showers across the Copper River Basin. Rainfall continues across southeast, while those in the north and across the lower and middle Yukon valleys and southwest, including Kodiak, are drying out. As we head into Sunday, really more of the same. A better chance for some showers and storms north and south of the stationary boundary that'll set up along the eastern Alaska range. Most areas are not going to see wall-to-wall rainfall. It'll be light rain passing through, maybe even showers at times. Light rain continues for southeastern Alaska. Drier weather now for the Arctic coast after record-setting snow for Barrow just the other day with only 0.7 of an inch. That was a considerable amount considering the time of year and the date. And drier weather for southwest, but look for a little more cloud cover along the YK to Bethel all the way into Bristol Bay, and some showers are possible for the Alaska Peninsula as we get into Sunday. By Monday, a lot of that should settle down a little bit. We'll still have some lingering showers across the west and central parts of the chain. High pressure is weakening. It's not quite as strong as it once was, as you saw on, this afternoon and again tomorrow afternoon, down to 1,018 millibars, but that should still keep some areas of fog going strong, especially across the west and northern Bering, and probably patches of it at least closer to the YK and the Kuskokwim Bay, and also across Bristol Bay. Better chance for showers and storms now across the interior as we start up the week, and some showers stretching in from Norton Sound to Nome up to Red Devil, also Galena, and probably down to McGrath. Trough of low pressure there across the central and western parts of the Yukon, stretches into the Gulf of Alaska. And you can notice that rainfall pattern across southeast seems to be breaking up just a little bit. It should be by Monday. It won't be entirely gone, but that more solid shield of rain probably is weakening in some way. By 3 o'clock this afternoon, we saw temps in the 50s and some places in the 60s. Looks like Fredericksburg was a little bit closer to the 66-degree mark there. 57 around Juneau, 59 in Yakutat, 50s and 60s for Prince William Sound. A beautiful day there, and 63 in Anchorage, 66 in Talkeetna, with Homer and Seward straddling the 60-degree mark. Kodiak City was showing 60 degrees, 55 in Northway, 56 in Eagle, 60 on the button there in Fairbanks today. Look like areas in around Tanana and down the valley there were cooler thanks to some of the rainfall that fell pretty close to the sensor, so it must have knocked down the temperatures there a little bit. Ambler and Bettles both in the 50s. Arctic Village 48, Fort Yukon 54. Anaktuvuk Pass was 39 degrees. The Arctic coast showing temperatures anywhere from 35 and above east of Barrow all the way out toward Kaktovik. Wainwright a little bit on the cooler side today. Point Hope and Point Lay. We saw temps in the 40s to about 50 degrees. Kotzebue Sound, low 50s there. Nome was 51. Unalakleet was 54 degrees. Bethel, much milder, 60 degrees. And low 60s for areas around Bristol Bay, with the Pribilofs in the lower 50s. Dutch Harbor and Alaska at 54 and 49 in Shemya. Now, low temperatures there tonight will probably be pretty close to what you have right now. 48 in Nunivak Island. Bethel looking at temps just shy of 50 degrees. Same goes for Kodiak Island and most of south central Alaska, including Prince William Sound. Southeast, you're looking at lows in the lower to mid 50s, with interior temperatures as cold as 34 degrees around Tanana, 43 in Fairbanks, 41 in Fort Yukon, 29 in Anaktuvuk Pass, and temperatures will likely go below freezing for Barrow out toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. High temperatures tomorrow, though, rebound nicely as that air dries, and we still have plenty of sunshine available anyway, at least as long as the clouds aren't in the way. We could get enough daytime heating to push those high temperatures back to about 70 degrees or so, though I hear it's been a little bit on the cool side this year up around Fairbanks and North Pole. So we'll see if we can get some more summer headed your way if you're still waiting. 65 degrees around Eagle, 66 around Northway, low to mid 60s for parts of Prince William Sound, considerably milder on Sunday for areas on the western side of the Kenai Peninsula into the Anchorage and Matanuska-Susitna valleys. And for southeast, temperatures will be at or just below the 60-degree mark, including places like Ketchikan, Annette, Sitka, and Juneau. Kodiak City, you're looking at 66, a mild day in King Salmon, and almost 70 degrees, 64 in Bethel, and low to mid-50s for most of the chain up until the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula around Cold Bay and Sand Point at 63. Now, flying weather, we expect IFR to start working its way back up into southeastern Alaska over the Dixon Entrance tomorrow, so just passing Ketchikan and Annette. Out across the west, obviously widespread IFR conditions to be expected in most areas north of the Bering Strait. Also expect a swath of IFR across the northern end of Kotzebue Sound and across the northern side of Norton Sound, thanks to high pressure there. Also across areas east of Barrow along the eastern and central Beaufort seacoast. Otherwise, MVFR along coastal areas and probably up and down the Alcan border with a better chance of rain there. Your pass conditions for Sunday include VFR for Adigan and Anaktuvik Pass, so some improvements there over recent days. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass also expected to see VFR trending toward MVFR in the morning and going back to VFR conditions by tomorrow afternoon in Rainy Pass there, so improvements. And for Windy Pass VFR conditions, we expect similar trends for Isabel Pass for your Sunday, and probably okay flying in some areas around Mentasta Pass, but going through the pass, generally speaking, looks like MVFR with a chance for some convection and thunderstorm activity in the afternoon, so watch for that to develop. Much better conditions in Tenita Pass tomorrow, and for Portage Pass, Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to stay at least at marginal levels for your Sunday. Now, freezing levels, well, you see that cold air dropping southward, and it affects the freezing levels, of course, when it does that. With that jet stream pattern dropping in the cold air across the interior, levels have dropped as low as 4,000 to 6,000 feet, and maybe even 2,000 feet for areas just north of the Alaska Range tomorrow. Out across the west with high pressure in command, we have much warmer air built into the southern Bering Sea, and those levels are as high as 14,000 feet. Across southeast, the level drops to about 8,000 feet and then rises again heading into western Canada. Icing potential is there, just kind of hit and miss across some areas, mainly across the northern Gulf Coast, across the eastern sections of the interior and the upper Yukon Valley along the Alcan, Kotzebue Sound, and also across the Yukon-Kuskokwim coastline, mainly above 10,000 to below 13,000 feet. A little bit higher up across the northwest and a little bit lower across the east, as you would expect. Most of that light to isolated moderate at worst. Here's our jet stream map, and this is a pretty big mess. It is not showing a consistent flow really from west to east. Instead, we have these interruptions where we have a very high amplitude pattern. You have another ridge right here. We've got trough digging southward. And what happens is this just puts on the brakes for weather. It really stops the show. And in this case, we've got weather coming in from the eastern Pacific. And where does it go? Well, it can't continue easily this way. It has to go up and through the Bering Sea. By the time it does that, it loses a lot of its moisture, a lot of its punch, and it allows cold air to drop down. And once again, we've spread the moisture and really active weather east of Alaska. So if you're waiting on something to change, this has got to change first, and right now it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. We have high pressure here in command of the west coast with winds coming down the coast around 20 to 25 knots. Low pressure is weak across the eastern Gulf. Winds around 5 to 10 knots there, and more of an onshore flow coming into Kotzebue Sound at 10 to 25 knots at 3,000 feet. A little bit of a different wind speed pattern here across southeast. Southerly winds at 15 knots, light winds for the interior, and then we have an onshore flow coming into the Seward Peninsula around 20 to 25 knots, and high pressure is still large and in charge across the southern Bering. So there is an opportunity for some turbulence in the northwest below 10,000 feet, in the southeast below 6,000 feet, and watch for some faster winds right across the northern Gulf Coast tomorrow below 6,000 feet, and also across the western part of the Aleutians below 3,000 feet. All of that light to isolated moderate. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back in just a few minutes with your marine update. Stay tuned.
Convective activity is popping up, or maybe there's ice in the clouds, or low ceilings. Can you get through it safely, or should you be on the ground waiting out the weather? As an instrument-rated pilot, these are questions you've got to be able to answer. When you're en route and an approach controller tells you to contact center, you talk to someone in a facility like this, an ARTCC, or Air Route Traffic Control Center. This is Washington Center in Leesburg, Virginia.
Washington Center, 1588 Sierra at 8,000 feet.
1588 Sierra, climb and maintain 10,000, 10,000, altimeter 29903.
An ARTCC is a lot bigger than an approach control facility. The radar is different, but the mission is the same. Keeping planes separated is number one. Keeping them out of weather comes after that. Like the Dulles facility, the backbone of the system is the controller and his or her PVD. The radar at center is an Air Route Surveillance Radar, or ARSR. Each controller has a slice of sky. Usually, the section is defined by vertical and horizontal boundaries. That is, altitude as well as length and width. That's why you may be told to contact a different frequency when flying over the exact same area at different altitudes. Every plane being tracked is tagged. The data boxes are formatted a little differently than on approach controls radar. Each has a flight or N number assigned, and actual altitude, destination, and ground speed. The data box also indicates whether an aircraft is climbing or descending. To keep screen clutter down, not all the aircraft are shown on PVDs.
Centurion 892, descend and maintain 4,000.
Down to 4,000 for...
Flight progress strips track each IFR flight the controller is handling. Unlike RAPCON's ASR, Center's Air Route Surveillance Radar can see out 200 to 250 miles, but it's more limited than approach radar for seeing weather.
Washington Center, this is Piper 73 Juliet.
Go ahead, 73 Juliet.
Are you showing any weather up ahead on our route?
Right now I'm getting some returns from that area, but it could be just an inversion. Our screens aren't too sharp when it comes to spotting precip. I do have some active returns, but they're not going to be a factor on your route.
On Center's PVD, level 1 or lighter precipitation is depicted by these slashing lines. Heavier weather is indicated by the little H's. It's not just that ARSR doesn't see weather very well. Sometimes it thinks it sees something that's not there. All radar is subject to certain errors. Radar waves can be bent by atmospheric phenomena besides rain, like temperature inversions. Temperature inversions can cause the radar to give false returns and make it think it's seeing precipitation. Controllers learn to interpret most of the false returns. Computer enhancements to the radar image have improved the ability to tune out ground clutter and atmospheric-related false returns, but it still occurs. These cross-hatched lines show the returns from two different sensors. If H's show up in these cross-hatched areas, it's probably actual weather. Some of this stuff you wouldn't want to go through in a battleship.
88 Sierra, contact Cleveland Center on 124.32.
1588 Sierra, Cleveland on 12432.
Controllers can adjust the brightness and superimpose the aircraft track and the weather radar returns simultaneously for easier viewing and vectoring, or advising of weather in relation to the aircraft. But unlike the 6 levels of contrast available with Approach Control's ASR-9 radar, Center's radar has only 2 levels.
Cleveland Center, Debonair 1588 Sierra with you at 10, that's 10,000.
Roger, 1588 Sierra, Bradford altimeter 2991. Be advised you've got an area of weather about 5 miles ahead.
Cleveland Center, this is Cessna 89er Tango with a request.
Go ahead, 89er Tango.
We're starting to get some pretty good rain here. Are you showing any significant weather between us and University Park?
89er Tango, our radar isn't very good for picking up weather, and that is in the fringe area of our coverage.
Roger, Center, 89er Tango.
I know what you're wondering. If controllers have all this great information, how come they can't share it with me when I'm in IMC trying to pick my way through weather? A couple of reasons. First, controllers aren't trained to be meteorologists. Another reason, the issue of liability. The FAA doesn't want to be held responsible in the event of a subsequent mishap. That's also why FAA forecasts are conservative and often filled with doom and gloom whenever there's a possibility of significant weather occurring along your route. If the forecast calls for clear skies and someone bends some metal after stumbling into unexpected IMC conditions, that forecast could be deemed partly responsible. That built-in negative bias in the forecast is another reason that you have to be proficient at interpreting weather data yourself. The same goes for telling you which way to turn when you're rocking in the clouds. Workload permitting, if controllers see you heading for convective activity, they'll often make suggestions on headings to take for weather avoidance. They'll give vectors through wide gaps in activity or to avoid the area completely. But to get more specific information, you have to know how to ask, because the way you frame your questions to ATC affects the level of information you receive.
Center, 26 Hotel, we see 2 cells, one at our 12 o'clock and one at our 2 o'clock. with what looks like about a 20-mile gap between them. Does your radar agree with that?
26 Hotel, I see the weather you're referring to, but the gap looks more like 12 miles. If controllers aren't offering suggestions of their own, see if they'll agree with yours. Frame questions as statements that controllers can confirm or contradict based on what they see on their radar. But remember, a controller's primary responsibility is traffic separation, and that keeps them pretty busy, especially in bad weather, when you need help the most.
Center, this is United 1124. We'd like to deviate 20 degrees left for some buildups.
The combination of convective activity and deviation reports signals that a lot of pilots are going to start looking for smoother routes. If you need a deviation, ask for it. But obviously, controllers can't let planes go wherever they want. There's other traffic out there too. So for pilots, getting where you want to go as directly as possible may require a little horse trading.
Cleveland Center, 88 Sierra. We'd like to deviate 20 degrees west to get around to buildup.
Negative 88 Sierra. Conflicting traffic ahead. I'll need you on course or a right turn.
That won't work for 88 Sierra. We really need a left turn.
88 Sierra. If you want to go to the west side, I'll have to climb you to 12,000 for about 10 miles for converging traffic.
Okay, we can live with that. 88 Sierra.
Okay, 88 Sierra. Climb to and maintain 12,000. Suggested heading of 340 degrees. Direct Keating when able. I'll bring you back down to 10,000 in about 5 minutes.
88 Sierra, out of 10 for 12,000 on a 340 heading, direct Keating when able.
As a pilot, you have to be able to tell the controllers what you want. Are you looking for lower? Steering to your destination? Vectors around a cell. If you're unclear about what you want, or if the controller is unclear about what you want, he'll ask, what are your intentions? That means the ball is in your court. You have to decide what you're going to do.
Time now for a look at your sea ice edge, and you can always see this information anytime you like by heading to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. You can see that all this ice is not shore fast anymore, and there's more and more areas of open water next to the coastline, including areas now east of Barrow. That trend will probably continue, but we've also noticed that a lot of this ice is being kind of pushed together there, so those concentrations could be a lot thicker than what you find closer to the edge. Here's a look at the forecast now for southeastern Alaska. Look for a south and southeasterly flow from 15 to 20 knots across the inner waterways. More of a southeasterly flow running the entire length of the coastline from 15 knots, anywhere from 5 to 6 foot seas along that boundary, with the highest seas north around Yakutat. As we get into Monday, more of a stronger southeasterly flow until we get to some lighter easterly winds around Yakutat with a 4-foot sea, otherwise 6-foot seas south of the northern entrances. A northerly flow in the Lynn Canal and southeasterlies on the inside for the central and southern parts of the inner waterways. 15 knots there with a 3-foot sea on Monday. Across south central, look for light winds from the north and east for Prince William Sound. A stronger easterly flow there around the northern Gulf Coast. After that, things are pretty light, and in most cases they're variable on either side of the Kenai Peninsula. More of a northwesterly wind coming across the Barrens from 10 to 15 knots with 3-foot seas there, and winds crossing Kodiak Island at 15 knots, slowing a little bit on the eastern side with seas dropping to 3 feet. On Monday, look for a variable flow on either side of the Barrens and Kodiak Island with 10 knots there at best. A light and variable flow across the northern and western Gulf, including inside Prince William Sound, but will maintain a southwesterly flow through the Cook Inlet there, about 10 to 15 knots with 3-foot seas expected on Monday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, a broad northwesterly flow there, a little more variable as you head south of Sand Point and King Cove with 10 knots, otherwise 15 knots with a 3 to 4-foot sea on the Bering and Pacific sides. As we get into Monday, winds are picking up a little bit more on the Bering side, about 20 knots with a 5-foot sea, and 15 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas on the Pacific side for Monday afternoon. For the Aleutians, a variable flow north of Nikolsky and Unalaska, around 10 knots with a 3-foot sea. Easterlies coming out of Atka, Adak, all the way out toward Kiska and Attu, 25 knots with 8 to 10-foot seas by the time you get to the western chain. Northerlies south of Unalaska and Nikolsky, that becomes a little more variable as you head westward, and southeasterlies on the Pacific side of Adak and Atka, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. For Monday, the broad southeasterly flow is trying to pick up a little bit more. You see 15 to 25 knots there, and seas running between 4 to as high as 8 or 9 feet out in the west. More of a variable flow north of Unalaska, and more of a northwesterly flow south of Unalaska and Nikolsky with a 3-foot 2-foot sea on the Pacific side. For the west coast, westerlies coming in across the St. Matthew Island waters and into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. 4-foot seas there as it approaches the coast. 20-knot wind from the south and west around St. Lawrence Island. 7-knot winds there with the northwesterly flow for the Pribilofs with a 5-foot sea. Expecting that to drop to about 4 feet as we head into Monday with a variable flow on 10 knots. And north and westerly winds continue across the northern Bering Sea with a variable flow in the Kuskokwim Bay area. 20 knots with a 5-foot sea expected. For the Arctic coast, easterlies will continue along the Beaufort Sea coast, again also helping to move some of that ice westward. Look for a 2 to 3 foot sea there north of Prudhoe Bay out toward Kaktovik. An offshore flow from Wainwright, Cape Lisburne, and Point Hope with a southerly flow inside of Kotzebue Sound at 25 knots, becoming northerly on Monday with east and northeasterly winds running around the coast. As we head into Monday afternoon, 15 to 20 knots should continue across the north with 3 to 4 foot seas and 3 to 4 foot seas as well for the Chukchi Seacoast starting up the week. Recapping tonight's weather, light rains possible across southeastern Alaska. The back side of the rainfall continues to press eastward through the eastern parts of the interior and the Copper River Basin. Showers and maybe even a brief thunderstorm possible across some of the higher terrain and the hillsides. Otherwise, much drier weather for the west coast, the lower Yukon Valley, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and an opportunity for a few showers across the Alaska Peninsula. But high pressure is in command of the Bering, and it's going to stay that way as we head through the week. Look for colder air to continue across the coastal plain and the Arctic coast itself, with some temperatures going below freezing again in the early morning hours. Otherwise, light rain is possible across the north and western coast, parts of the Seward Peninsula as we go through Sunday afternoon. Showers and thunderstorms may focus on the eastern interior and the upper Yukon Valley into the Copper River Basin, but it should be maintained there. However, this type of pattern will keep some light rain across southeastern Alaska and sets the stage for some of those east to westerly moving waves coming out of western Canada. So we'll be watching for that possibility as we head into Monday and Tuesday with a better chance of storms in the interior, showers across the middle Yukon Valley, and rain slowing down in southeast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.